Welcome back to the show, you radical health beauty. Today we have Taylor Collins in the studio. Taylor is a force of nature and his brand Force of Nature, as well as building epic, selling epic, roam ranching, regenerative agriculture, pushing back against some of the narrative of why the future should be plant-based. No, not here. The future should be regeneratively raised meats. What an epic conversation. We have callers talking about how to get started. We talk about all of the lessons. We talk about raising children closer to nature. We talk about bison harvesting, biodiversity, soil health. This one is so juicy. Sit back, sink your teeth into this. Let's get into the show. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. Got a pretty special episode for you today. I have Taylor Collins in the studio live, the man, the myth, the legend. Heck of a story, brother, but before we get into all of that, how you doing today? Thanks for taking the trip, couple hours away, right, on Rome Ranch?
Bro, I only have a sweet 45-minute drive to get here.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, we're practically neighbors.
We're neighbors. Mm-hmm. That's good to know. All right, so maybe I got to get over to Rome Ranch because what you guys are doing over there is incredible. Talking to a couple of our staff here, the bison harvest, everything you're doing to regenerate soil, the whole mission, the whole story, full circle from veganism to bison harvesting to everything in between. It's been a wild ride, man. Tell me that. What's going on?
Oh, wow. Okay, so, I mean, first of all, feel incredibly grateful and blessed to be at this point in my life where I am, feel very settled in. And thank you for having me here today. Being a part of this podcast and this journey with you is cool. Yeah, I think my story is not necessarily unique in the sense that I've iterated throughout my life, and I feel like I have had to die multiple times to be reborn, and each time to be reborn better and bigger. And I think that's a really healthy, natural cycle. And so today, where I see myself today, if you could have come to me in a dream 10 years ago and said, Taylor, your life will be on a bison ranch, or however your cool accent is, I'd be like, this is a nightmare. Get the hell out of here. That's never going to happen. But it's a reality.
Yeah, man, that thread, because obviously you're much closer to life and death now in a very literal sense. You're living on the land, you're raising animals. But this proverbial life and death, these miniature cycles we go through in our own life to be born into something more true and meaningful. What do you think has guided you on that? Because it's been, like you said, surprising. So what's your kind of guiding light? What's your anchor to just keep trusting, keep being willing to die so you can be born into something more true?
Yeah, that's a good question. And first of all, I think when we talk about this, the cycle of life, which is being born and then living and then death and then the decay process, which that all happens repeatedly. One way to look at that is how energy flows throughout the universe. And so energy is always cycling.
Mm-hmm.
It can neither be created nor destroyed. It's just always transferring. And so the way that I see kind of my evolution is just being receptive, being willing to align myself with the people that provide the energy that I feel is a guiding force for good. And really just trusting my instincts and my gut. That's how we've always lived. I think experts and consultants are kind of bullshit. To me, they like remind me of these dudes who are kind of a little bit scammy, like they want to help you find the love of your life and teach you how to date a girl, but they've never had a girlfriend.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of this weird dynamic. And so for me, it's just always kind of come down to trying to hone in on my own instinct to do what's right and what's wrong. And I felt that's actually been a pretty strong guiding force, and the higher level of health and consciousness that I have, the clearer it becomes.
How much of that has been fine-tuned, putting yourself back into a life that's more connected with nature versus a life that X amount of years ago was probably more the classic concrete jungle kind of life?
Yeah, the connectivity to nature has always been something that my wife and I have shared and enjoyed. And for so long, we would go on these wonderful trips, these backpacking country, camping trips, and we'd just feel so good, and our heart and our soul was so nourished. And then we'd come back to the city, and it just felt like a part of us died a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this like dynamic where we had to be in the city. We were growing our own business. We had responsibilities, but we knew that there was always a calling to get back to the land. And so we were first generation land stewards. We didn't have access to family land growing up. We didn't have any kind of history with agriculture as far as part of our personal culture. And so for us, it was really just when we started visiting ranches and farms, which, by the way, I encourage people to do. I think we have this weird thing where we go on vacations and we go to these like really nice spots. We should be going to really beautiful spots, but some of us go to like cities, big cities. And for us, we always said, like, what if we go on vacation and we go to farms and ranches that we support and then we purchase our products from? And so it was kind of that journey, is going to places like Bluffton, Georgia, White Oak Pastures that changed our life and said, you know, these guys have figured out this is the highest calling, the highest purpose would be to manage land, be on land, co-create with Mother Nature, and then also feed a community.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I like that reframe of what a vacation might look like, you know, and going to do things that you're passionate about, of course, which it might be nice sometimes to go to Cancun and drink margaritas on the beach, but like to put your feet in the soil and see life and rekindle that relationship is something that I think we're all naturally drawn to. I believe that is our original home, that we came from there, and now we unfortunately have to take vacations to go back into nature instead of living in and on it, but we are an extension of nature. So this kind of took you on a wild journey, and I know that Epic is a brand that's very well known in this space. And for you personally, I feel like it's kind of in the rearview mirror a little bit, because you built this thing, you sold it, and now it's transitioned on. But how did you guys get into that? How did you build such a monstrous brand, a positive monstrous brand like Epic?
Yeah, that's a funny journey, you know. Leading up into the creation of Epic, we were plant-based eaters for a long time, and so we had kind of made one of those dramatic pivots in our life and started reintroducing animal protein, and it was just a game changer. We could never look back. So we had this opportunity to create a product that really was for Katie and myself mostly. It's kind of for selfish reasons. We were going on, 100-mile bike rides, training at really high levels for Ironman races, and all the sugar, carbohydrate rich, highly processed protein powders, we were just done with that. And so we were packing bacon and ribeyes and different meat in Ziploc bags and other packages and bringing it on bike rides. And so for us, that was like this game-changing moment in our life where we said, this is a product that's right for us. Surely there's someone else who has the same experience and same need. And so we kind of went on a whim, and, we like this whole idea of fake it before you make it, just kind of like showing up. We showed up at the biggest trade show in the United States for the natural foods industry, and we had this package, and the package was just like product that wasn't real. We were sealing it in our house with an ironing press, and we just showed up like with ultimate confidence, saying this is going to be the most badass product that any retailer could ever have on their shelf. And when we got to that show, we were, there was like 5,000 vendors. 4,999 of those vendors were plant-based companies, because this, at the time, plant-based equated to health and natural foods. Meat was not. Meat was on the periphery, always been demonized. And we were ready for just some psychopaths to come up to the booth and throw fake blood at us or something like that. But the overwhelming reception was just so powerful. And I remember leaving that trade show just telling Katie, like, this is it. Like, this is our calling. This is our purpose right now. We need to just go as hard as we can, put our heads down and focus, and kind of make some sacrifices at that moment just so we could achieve a greater accomplishment. And we just went fast and hard. At that show, we had the opportunity. We met face to face with the CEO of Whole Foods and looked him right in the eyes and said, of course we can deliver this product to you in 3 months at a national level. And Katie's like, what the fuck are you doing? That's impossible. But again, when there's a will, there's a way. And so we figured it out, and we just had this cool opportunity to do something very different, and consumers were ready for that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the first time I learned about Epic was at PaleoFX years and years ago, probably 7 years ago at this point. I think you guys were still kind of in your infancy, and I was like, this is incredible. There's options now. And, since then, it's becoming more accepted that this animal-based, regeneratively raised meat thing is maybe not the monster it's been painted to be. But I do want to focus on that for a second, because if you were doing all the right things, you were plant-based, you were vegan, you were running triathlons, why did you all of a sudden start packing bacon in a Ziploc bag and taking them on bike rides? What happened? That sounds like there's a missing piece of the puzzle there.
There is. I skipped over an important part, and that was, again, on our own journey. I was in school training to be a physical therapist, and I had a lot of nutritional sports science education along the way. undergraduate degree in that. And the conventional wisdom and narrative at that point in time, again, this is like over 10 years ago, was just, if you want to achieve the highest levels of success as an endurance athlete, you need to like cut out meat, you need to cut out fats, you need to really go plant-based and go heavy with carbohydrates, carb loading, and eating sugars and sugar-like products. And so you see that, like you see all these professional triathletes 10, 20 years ago, they're emaciated, they're skeletons, they look like shit, they look sick. And we just kind of got looped into that circle. And maybe that was, I mean, in retrospect, that was probably the first time we learned that like this overarching dogmatic narrative that's given to you by a higher entity or by science should always be questioned. And so it took a couple years where I think our bodies could tolerate that until everything collapsed. And specifically, I feel like my wife was like decaying inside. We talk about the cycle of life. It was just nasty, but she had terrible systemic inflammation, autoimmune reaction, couldn't train. Specifically, she had a knee that just swelled up to the size of a watermelon for months, had exploratory surgery, was told she needed arthritis medicine for the rest of her life. She's 21 years old. She's a healthy lady. And we saw every health practitioner across every spectrum of medicine you could imagine. And in that whole process, we were thinking like, okay, we must not be eating clean enough. So let's transition.
Not vegan enough.
Yeah, from vegetarian to vegan. Ah, shit, things got worse. Hold on. Let's go a little bit more extreme. Let's go plant-based vegan. Let's go like juice vegan, like raw juice.
Like the raw macrobiotic, all of those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like in retrospect, we went to one health practitioner at the very end of this long and painful journey. And he, first minute of this evaluation, he just said, "Tell me about your diet." And we're like, "Don't worry about this, doc. We can skip over this. We are so dialed in. We're going to impress you with how we eat." And this dude right then, I mean, he put his notepad down. He was like, "This is over. Like 1 minute into this interview, I know what's going on." And he said, "You need to get rid of all that raw food shit. You need to reintroduce healthy pasture-raised, grass-fed meats into your diet. Cook your vegetables if you eat vegetables, but you probably don't need to eat that many vegetables." And for us, we were at such a point of desperation. We didn't have another alternative, backed up against the wall. And so we changed our lifestyle and our diet. And I mean, years of symptoms resolved in weeks.
Wow.
And a way I always think about it too, and Katie, my wife, is okay with me saying this because it's true, but if we would have stayed on that plant-based trajectory, she would either be dead at this point in time, she would either be in a wheelchair, or maybe even had her leg amputated, which that would be kind of cool to have a wife with. An amputated leg, we talk about that. I would have put a bison
rancher with one leg. That would be pretty badass.
Because you could make her peg out of a bison bone, and it'd be pretty dope.
It would be pretty dope. What a crazy story, though, man! And thank goodness for that doctor with some. It wasn't Dr. Paul Saladino or Dr. Sean Baker or something, was it?
Man, those guys were that was a little bit before. Yeah, they were like out in the forefront public, but shit, that knowledge didn't exist at that point in time at any kind of scale. It wasn't the conversation that people were having. Yeah. So yeah, it was very early on. This just happened to coincide with kind of the evolution of paleo. So when we launched Epic, Paleo FX was in its first year.
Yeah, right.
It was in Austin. We were in Austin, so we're like, yeah, let's go to this show.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. I often think about especially when you combine the intense plant-based veganist kind of movement with high-level athletics too. You now know, I'm sure, you raise some of the best protein in the world, that the body needs protein. And in a sense, in a kind of twisted way, the vegan body gets its protein by breaking down what's on the skeleton. You know what I mean? It becomes an animal-based diet, but it's just chewing through the tissue of self. And that's that, deterioration. And then you have all the gut issues because goodness knows how many, plant toxins you're exposed to, and the pesticides and the herbicides and the leaky gut and the inflammation. So yeah, I'm very glad that you guys kind of...
even to take that thought to another level, it's like, yes, you're mining your own stored resources to stay alive on that diet. But the land on which that food is grown from is also extracting all of the natural resources from that. So that diet, in a sense, is just extractive. And at some point in time, it will always collapse, whether the landscape collapses or the human body will fall apart.
Yeah, it's like a good full circle moment of this idea of, the dystopian planet of the vegans, row crops as far as your eye can see, this monocrop future, and the kind of monocropped diversity inside of the human body when it's not getting the bioavailable nutrition from animal meats and fats and organs. that systems break down without biodiversity. And I know that's a big part of what you're trying to do now with the soils and how that, impacts the foods that we eat. So you kind of take the red pill, as it were. You reclaim your health. Now you're looking to package this stuff and give that gift to other people. Epic grows probably at a rate faster than you ever could have imagined, because you are just following something that's aligned and you're stumbling forward and you're figuring it out. How many years is the Epic story through the growth of that and the sale, and then moving on to the next chapter?
Yeah, the Epic growth happened pretty quick. I mean, like, being here today brought back really good memories being in the Heart and Soil office, because like our early Epic offices were houses too.
Yeah.
And it's just such a good vibe. It feels so right. It's just so much more alive and personal than like a sterile office environment. Yeah. And so this is where it's at. I hope you guys remember these days as like some of the best days that you're going to have in this company's growth and evolution. But yeah, Epic it blew up. I remember early on, we were always ranked in the energy bar category. And so like we would get this data from retail stores nationally, and we were like, early on, we broke into the top 10 products. Like any bar that you could ever buy in the United States, we were top 10. And it was our bison bar. And it always looked like peanut butter chocolate, peanut butter chocolate, peanut butter chocolate, bison, peanut butter chocolate, peanut butter. And there's like all these different brands. And so the bison was like the peanut butter and chocolate of the carnivores. And it just kept climbing. We early on, within the first, honestly, 6 months, we exceeded the available supply of grass-fed bison in North America, which shocks some people, but that supply is very small. Only about 10% of all bison are truly finished on grass. The other 90 are confined in some capacity and supplemented with grain. So that's a disconnection with consumers. So early on, we had to stop selling our most our highest praised, most popular item. And that was like a really weird dynamic too. Yeah. So not sell a product that everyone wanted because the supply chain just wasn't there. But that was a big opportunity for us to use this company to restore, impact more grasslands, get animals back on pasture as they were intended to.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you guys ended up branching into all kinds of different products. I know my wife to this day was talking before we hit record. We have a 3.5-year-old at home. My wife is heavily pregnant, another one about to join the tribe. And she makes these, animal-based chicken nuggets. We get truly pasture-raised chickens. Then she gets the Epic pork rind. She blitzes them up, dips them in an egg wash, fries them in tallow. Oh my God, they're so delicious, So bringing in different products and stuff was a huge part of that story. What do you think made Epic stand out, though, amongst the crowd? Like, what was the catalyst? Obviously, there's a need there, but you guys did a lot of stuff right, I think, and did it really well. For you, reflecting, what do you think really made it stand out?
Yeah, I think early on, it was just the differentiation of the product, the unique nature of it, and the branding, the packaging, the marketing of it. I mean, like, you're going into this aisle of the grocery store where, I mean, it's just like colorful packages. Everyone is just shopping based on what's the cheapest item, and it's hard to stand out. And so we had this package that had these anatomical, beautiful historical illustrations of these animals. And that was a really important part of the journey, was to create that in a way that honored these animals and then connected consumers to the reality that in order for them to sustain life and get nutrition, that there is a sentient being on the other side that sacrifices its life. And so that was something that, early on, the experts were like, you guys are idiots. Don't do that. Do not pursue that. People do not want to see the face of an animal that they're going to eat. And so, following your instinct, challenging that idea, we said, this doesn't feel right. We think it's actually an obligation for people who eat meat to understand and have that connection to that animal and to that source. And so, just having that on the shelf day one, you couldn't walk through that aisle and not pick it up and say, what the hell is this thing? Yeah. I've never seen or heard of any nonsense like this. And then you pick it up and you're like, oh, damn, that sounds pretty good. Let's try this out.
That's super cool. So then all of these themes that you're kind of bringing into the product, like prioritizing quality, supporting regenerative farmers. Did you at any point know that this was the world you were going to end up in? Because eventually you come to sell Epic, and now, we're going to get into the next chapter of the story with Rome Ranch and Force of Nature and everything you're doing there. When did it start to bubble up that, all right, like, well, we're going to do this. Why don't we become the farmers and the ranchers? What happened there?
Yeah, it was, we visited all of our suppliers with Epic early on. We spent time, we knew the families, we established relationships with these people. And every time we'd go out to a farm or a ranch that was managed holistically or regeneratively, just taking your shoes off and getting grounded there was the most powerful, sacred experience. And again, it was just a moment of such clarity in which we said, if we ever have the opportunity to do something like this would be our highest calling. Like this would be achieving everything we ever wanted to achieve in life. And so through selling Epic, we were able to realize that goal and that dream. And so when we sold the company, we could have reinvested in the stock market or some other bullshit schemes. And we decided to put everything into land, because land for us is like the truest value. And it gives us the freedom to live a life that we want to, but also to procure food for ourselves and our community, and then do so in a way that is actually beneficial for the land and can restore all these broken cycles of nature. And so Rome Ranch right now, that's our goal, that's our mission. And a big part of that also is bringing community out to experience and to learn what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that too. Some of the events that you do out there and the harvests and things. It feels to me like, because you ignored the experts, good for you, thinking for yourself, trusting what's alive in you, that you were able to do something that was in alignment. And when you do that, money's not perfect, but it's about one of the best systems we've got right now for conveying value. And I like to reframe it sometimes as like green energy. And the green energy that you got for building a product that served a need that then you got and took back. And instead of doing bullshit, like throwing it in the stock market, you said, how can we give more energy back? And how can we keep the cycle of that flowing through the cycle of life, through the cycle of rehabilitation of soil, and through bison of all creatures, these big, somewhat scary monsters for people that don't understand them, but also like really soft, gentle, wise, like spiritual, wild animals. So you've acquired all of this energy. You're going to do this. How soon in the process is right, we're going to do bison instead of, well, let's start with cows, or let's do sheep, or let's do, what else?
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back to getting grounded, looking at what your community needs, what's available, and then doing something that's differentiated and something that feels right for us. And so the conventional wisdom is, you're fucking crazy if you raise bison. Those things are wily. They'll tear down your fences. They'll mess up all your equipment. They'll kick your ass if you look at them wrong. And all those things are true, unless you co-create with them. And so you work alongside them and you meet their basic biological needs. And so for us, bison it just made so much sense. I kind of always felt like it was somewhat of a spirit animal in how we lived our life. There's a lot of wisdom to learn from a bison, like running into a storm. That is a fantastic lesson that everyone should embrace. But bison for us too, they're native keystone species. So they're the largest native ruminant animal in North America. They are the architects of our most fertile food system. So like all those states that begin with the letter I, like that we monocrop with industrial agriculture, constantly extracting. So like Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Idaho, those states were created. The fertility there was gifted to us through large herds of bison and other ruminant animals. And so for us to bring a keystone species back on a landscape in which it had been removed about 150 years ago, no one else in our area is raising bison. It was a really exciting opportunity to see how that animal interacted and in what capacity of forgiveness Mother Nature could grant us.
Yeah, it's a term we use a lot on the podcast, is the remembering, like kind of remembering what we've forgotten. And I think bison are a beautiful representation of that, because they've been here for a long time. They're a native animal. They're an animal that's got such power and mystery. I'm curious what it's like to actually stand in the presence of one of those. I've heard you tell stories where you've been charged, you've looked them in the face, you've saw the horny bulls, you've saw it all. Like what's the magnitude of the presence of that animal? Because I've only been blessed to see them from afar. I'm kind of curious what it's like to be up close and personal with one of these wildebeests.
Yeah. So they are Ice Age creatures.
Yeah.
And they are they're not predators, but they are the apex species out there on the prairie or the pasture. And so when you go into their space, they are allowing you to be there. And so we found that the energy that you put in to that experience is the energy that you're going to take out of that. And so if you come nervous, anxious, afraid, the animals pick up on that. They're highly sensitive, highly reactive. And so I think when you go with that open heart and that reverence and that respect, complete different experience. The animals are calm, they're curious, but they're massive.
Mm-hmm.
They can kick your ass. Like when you go into Yellowstone National Park, you go to the park ranger's office, you pay your entrance fee, and they have a rolling video of patrons getting attacked by bison.
Just scare you away, right?
I mean, it's just like you are entering bison territory. And there's this one that's just so, I mean, I've seen it myself, but there's one video that stands out where there's like this morbidly obese dude. He's like 300 pounds, just so big. And he's taking a selfie with a bison.
Oh.
And you think like, yeah, that guy's huge. Like a bison would probably maybe, I don't know, like not totally destroy this guy. And it picks this dude up like he's an infant and throws him 15 feet high into a tree. I mean, this poor guy. And he's like, if he was your size or my size, we'd just stick in the tree, but he just cracks every branch falling down. I mean, it's horrible. But that's but I think that is the reality and the respect that you need to give those animals.
Yeah, definitely. The reverence of like, I really liked what you said about the energy. I do think animals are tapped into a different kind of intelligence, maybe because they never left nature like we did. Maybe that intelligence is in us too, if we return to it. But it sounds very much like you are doing this in a very honorable and co-creative way with the bison. It's not like, we own these now and they're just a price tag in itself. It's something more. It's this rehabilitation of soil. And we've already thrown out a couple of these terms like regenerative agriculture, holistic grazing. And in a world where some of these terms can become like buzzwordy and greenwashing is a very real thing, like how do you define that? Like what even is it for the listener that's kind of new to this? What is regenerative agriculture? What is this holistic grazing, rotational grazing? Why are bison so pivotal in this story?
Sure. So bison are just kind of like the original architects, and it's not anything special to bison. You can manage any ruminant animal in the image of a bison.
Mm-hmm.
And so historically that would have looked like the predator-prey relationship, where these animals were in high density for protection. But through that high density, they got really uniform grazing, really evenly distributed grazing, high concentration of cycling of those nutrients through their manure. The landscape got positively impacted, but they were also hunted by all these predator species, and they didn't want to hang out with hundreds of thousands of pounds of their own manure. So those animals were always moving. And so you can take that lesson and you can apply that to your own individual context. So it's not necessarily bison are this magical species that's a regenerative being. They are, but I think all ruminant animals have that capacity. Yeah. And so that's even just a mindset difference. Like we don't call them our livestock or our animals. They are regenerative beings. They're co-creating alongside us with all of nature too. So we have, the animals that we intentionally put up on a ranch, and then we also have wildlife that's abundant, and they have a very important critical role. But back to your kind of question about regenerative agriculture, really, for me, that's looking into Mother Nature for guidance and for wisdom. And all land globally has been extracted from for at least 100 years. So all land is only operating at a very small percent of its productive capacity. And when you regenerate and you restore land, you come to an ecosystem, and it's very contextual. So you look into your ecoregion. What was this farm or ranch once hewn from? Was it a woodland? Was it a savanna? Was it a grassland? And you start thinking, what are the cycles of nature that allowed that system to operate at a very high functioning level where you weren't constantly putting inputs into the system? And so, when I think about this, I think about fixing the cycles of nature that have been broken through chemical industrial agriculture. So the energy cycle, the nutrient cycle, the water cycle, the carbon cycle. There's so many cycles that probably we don't even understand. There could be an energy cycle.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the way that I frame. And then truly, that's regenerative agriculture. To do that at the highest level, I think you need to be a regenerative being. I think you have to adopt that in your own life. So are you looking at your life holistically? Do you recognize that every relationship you form, there's going to be, like you'll never be acting in isolation. You'll always be impacting other people. Like this is a living system that we're all a part of. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you nurturing yourself spiritually, physically, mentally? And I think in order to fully express that highest level of regenerative land management, you have to be embodying it yourself. Or otherwise you're just kind of like, there's a disconnect. There's a disassociation.
Yeah, you're like that expert again that says, I'm going to teach you how to find your dream partner who's never been in a healthy marriage, right? Like Correct. Integrity, walk the walk. And I think that was beautifully said. Are you Are you worried about the future of our soils, about the future of our environment if we do not adopt more regenerative practices? You mentioned a lot of this extraction of soils, and feeding a lot of people certainly has consequences. Is regenerative agriculture the solution?
I think the regenerative agriculture, it gives me greater hope than any other path moving forward. And just some examples of things that I've seen on my land. But at the end of the day, what I've realized is Mother Nature's capacity for forgiveness is so much greater than our own species' capacity for destruction. And that gives me a lot of peace. Because we used to think that it would take 500 years. Science and academia was advocating 500 years to build an inch of topsoil. That's simply not true. There's pioneers in the space like Joel Salatin and Will Harris who have built 3-4 inches of topsoil in 10 years.
Oh,
that's insane.
Wow.
So, like, it's hard to wrap your head around, but it's almost like, we have like all these beautiful live oaks out here, and it can take 300-400 years for a live oak to really achieve just this phenomenal status. But what if I told you you could plant a seed and in 10 years that live oak would become a 400-year-old live oak? I mean, that is like the stretch of faith and the opportunity that Mother Nature gives us when we put those cycles back into operation. And so I think just as inspiring as it is for humans to really reclaim their own health and their own journey, overcome tremendous obstacles in the face of modern medicine, heal themselves through really fundamental basic things like food and lifestyle, the same applies to land. And so if you have hope in knowing all these stories of people that have changed their lives for the better, that is directly applicable to all of our landscapes with the right mindset.
Yeah. It's like, I love wordplay, and soil is so close to soul and humus is so close to human. And it's just this very cyclical interchange between the two. I guess one of the common pushbacks, or confusion points for people around regenerative agriculture is it's not scalable. Is that true? Is there any truth in this idea that regenerative agriculture is not scalable to, reverse what we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that narrative is absolutely being driven again by experts and by scientists that have conflicting interest. That, no surprise, is connected to the pharmaceutical agricultural industry. Yeah, and so the truth is, and the reality is, that right now on our ranch that we've been managing for almost 7 years, we can raise 3 times more animals per acre than anyone else in our county.
Wow.
We have more wildlife than anyone else in our county. We have better water infiltration. We're springs are literally emerging out of rocks where water never was, or where water had been hundreds of years ago. And so for me to think about feeding the population, if I can take an acre of land and now make it 3 times more productive in 7 years, shit, that's a pretty good start. And I also think about when we have this conversation about feeding the population, I really think we begin to feed the global growing population when we learn how to feed ourselves in our community. And then we already figured it out from there on. It's replicable. So I don't think regenerative agriculture is about scale, like getting bigger. Each producer needs to get bigger enough to feed the world, but it's about contextually, how does everyone have more independence and freedom with their own food production?
Yeah. And it certainly starts with awareness, right? And choices and options. And I think because of the point you alluded to about the conflicts of interest and misaligned incentives, that this isn't going to be a top-down change. It's not going to come from big daddy government, big mommy farmer. They're not going to come save the day. It's a grassroots movement. And what would you say it would be like kind of a call to action for the consumer or the person that maybe, could start growing something? Like where could somebody start to even just kind of live this instead of just going to the store and buying the regular raised meats? Of course, you've got stuff on the shelves which is supporting that. Is there anything people can continue to do in their own lives to just continue to step into more of this regenerative identity?
Yeah, I there's a bunch of powerful ways people can become more connected. I think that connection is the key. I think being in relationship with nature is where it begins. And so we've always advocated, like, if you're an omnivore, if you're a carnivore, the highest way that you can source your nutrition is to hunt it yourself or to produce it yourself. But the reality is that not everyone can do that. And so that's where companies like Force of Nature exist. We think there's better solutions. But I also think that, with industrial chemical agriculture, kind of like a standard way food is produced, we have such a huge disconnection with the source and what a farm or a ranch actually looks like. And so I think it's something like 2% of our population now is farmers and ranchers. The other 98% of the population has nothing to do with the production of their own food.
Wow.
Which is mind blowing. And then you look at that in another way, and it's like you poll people on how many folks have actually been to a ranch that they purchase food from. It's less than 1% of the population.
Wow.
And I think that disconnection, that lack of relationship, is the biggest driving force that's allowing this perpetual system, this dysfunctional system, to erode our civilization and erode our landscape. So it's being more aware, it's being more conscious. It's going out, meeting your farmer, shaking their hand, introducing yourself, but then also introducing yourself to the earth in whatever capacity you want. Go outside, get grounded, be quiet, talk to a tree, just touch it, feel it, breathe it in.
Yeah. Shake the hand that feeds you, right? And, rekindle that relationship. I think sometimes in more of the domesticated human sense, to say, introduce yourself to the land, talk to a tree, ground your feet, can feel a little woo, right? A little esoteric. And I often say, like, feeling is believing. I live on 5 acres, and one of the first things I did when I got there was, introduce myself and set my intention that I'm going to try and work with this land to heal it from some of the things that were done. It was logged of the trees, and it's very, it's the classic stuff that everybody does. And I think rekindling that relationship is key. And if you're at a phase in your life right now where you live in a New York City, at least go find the farmer's market, at least vote with your dollar where you possibly can, because incentive drives out outcomes, right? And awareness can change the incentives, and hopefully we can change the outcomes, which I think is what we're trying to do here. And I'm curious about, the connection to food piece is, on one hand is, knowing where your food comes from is incredible, but to come like really full circle on that, you actually harvest on the land. You bring people in to witness that. Some of the people from Heart and Soil have witnessed that and just talked about how much of a spiritual experience it is, how transformative it is. What's that been like for you to, raise these animals and eventually then, pull the trigger and harvest on the land? And what's that taught you about the real connection to food, the full, kind of closure of that loop?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the kind of pushbacks that we will hear time to time from like that plant-based community is, how can you say that you have reverence and love for an animal while simultaneously taking its life? And it's just such a weird question, because it's, like, my first reaction is, well, what do you think I should do? Have no relationship with the animal that I'm about to harvest to feed myself? Do you think I should desecrate it? Do you think I should just see it as an income producing entity, a widget? And so I think that's a really strange idea. But for us, food waste in the United States is just like such an atrocious, terrible problem. So even when we're talking about, like, how do you feed this global population, which is kind of an annoying question that always gets asked of farmers and ranchers. But it's like, stop wasting so much fucking food. I don't know if you, I think, like, I've heard 40% to 60% of all food is wasted in the United States, thrown in the trash can. And so it's one thing to, disregard some kale you're not going to eat, but in my mind, to throw away animal protein from an animal, which was a sentient being that had a community, that had children likely out on the landscape, took multiple years to raise, created a positive impact on that ecosystem, and then to harvest it to nourish your body, but throw it in the trash can. I think that's such a terrible desecration. And so for us to bring people out to the ranch, community members, many times this is the first time people have ever seen an animal transition into death. And it's the most powerful, transformative experience they can have. And it's just so beautiful to watch. We're very clear, like, stating our purpose and our intention of the event. No one pull out cell phones. No one film this death. Like, we want you to be right there with that animal, feeling everything that comes up. And it's really, just like a return, a coming home to something that's greater, which is a greater ecosystem and universe, a soil system to which we're from and which we belong. And there's tears being shed, and they are not tears of sorrow or sadness or regret. They're tears of gratitude. They're tears of unleashing something within people that have been dormant for a long time. And it's just such a beautiful mixed community. You would think that the people that are coming out for these events, they're like maybe you and I, like the Heart and Soil crew, and the hardcore fans are there, and they show up with, like, a gallon of raw milk, and they want to mix blood in it and drink it and eat organs, which is so fun. But then there's also, like 70-year-old, grandma and grandpa who have never seen an animal die before. And it just shatters their reality, and it changes their purchasing power and their decisions from that moment forward. It's hard to go back to supporting an industrialized system And it's also changes their perspective and their reality of where they fit within that system, connecting to that cycle of life, that cycle of energy. But ultimately, like, we're not wasting any freaking food. This animal, we're celebrating in its full capacity. You know, we're going to use the bones. We're going to make jewelry with the bones. We're going to use the hide, the skull, the organs, the meat. Nothing goes to waste. And so that's really this mindset shift, this paradigm shift that we hope to accomplish at all those events.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What have you seen from the mourning process of the buffalo? Because I've heard some pretty cool stories about when one of them transitions, what the behaviors of the animals are like.
Yeah, that's just such a beautiful, inspiring moment to reflect. And so we'll go out there and there'll be 40 people, strangers for the most part, in a trailer, and we'll get them within 100 yards of the bison. And this is the most amazing part, is we have a herd of it fluctuates from 100 to 150 animals, depending on the rain. And we'll go out there and we'll have a list of 5 animals. And typically there'll be like a 3-year-old male. And within this herd, I'd say 75 plus % of the time, the animal that's on the list will separate itself from that herd, walk towards the crowd, look at everyone in the eyes. And I mean, this is like 75, 50 yards away. And then we have a shooter, and everyone knows that's the animal, and everyone's quiet, everyone's present. And then that animal gets harvested. We shoot it in the head, and its heart is still beating, and it drops instantly. Its sentience is gone. And the rest of the herd will come up to that animal, and there's some release of energy, some kind of expansion that we can't perceive as humans. But the bison, they see it and they feel it and they take it all in, and they all go up to that animal and they nudge it, they lick it, they take a moment, and then they cycle out and the next group comes in. And it's just so amazing. Like if you saw a drone shot of it, it'd be the downed animal completely surrounded with animals that are licking it and talking. And we'll give them 5-10 minutes to really process that transition and to mourn that animal or whatever's happening with that energy expansion. Let them realize that. And then we'll move the herd. We'll open up the gate. And this is cool too, because this is like the cycle of life. It moves on. Like that herd is now going to positively impact and continue to enrich our landscape. The bison that is down, it served its biological role. And now it's serving its next role, which is to feed our community. And so, yeah, people come up to that animal. And this is a new tradition that started 2 years ago. But there was a kid, you cut the jugular because the heart's still beating. So everyone puts their hand on the animal. Everyone says some kind of thank you or spends a moment to appreciate it. And some little girl a couple years ago just put her fingers in the blood and drank it. And everyone there was like, this makes so much sense. No one was shy. Everyone went in. And so now we do that at all those experiences too, which is just so beautiful. And it just shows so much reality and respect. And I think when you're in that moment, you're overwhelmed with so much emotion that it's easy to numb your body and separate yourself from that very moment. But when you put the blood in your mouth, it's like getting slapped in the face. You wake up again and you return, and it's time to get to work. Like something switches in your epigenetics where you're like, give me a knife. I don't know what I'm doing, but I kind of know what I'm doing. And it's beautiful because people are picking up knives and they're like instinctively going in there. I mean, you have to remember our ancestors were doing this with primitive stone tools. So we have the luxury of using knives, and everyone works together communally to extract the meat, to debone it, to grind it, to take it home, and really honor the animal throughout that whole cycle and consuming it.
It's so cool. Yeah, the cycle and the circle, the fact that you said they stand around in a circle and then you guys gather around in a circle, it's just very, very symbolic. And Noelle here was saying when she tasted that blood, it was like the best, like just boost, slap in the face, like coffee but better, and just like wow, like so much power in that. Because like you said, the machinery's still running, the spirit's gone wherever the energy's gone, but it's so incredibly powerful. And then the celebration of eating that, and the legacy of the bison lives on in what it did for the soil, and how the bison then becomes you, and you can now express your highest form of health and go about doing the best work. And maybe you reflect on, like you said, kind of scarily, that if you never awoke to the problem of the vegan path that you was on, that would you be able to even have the life force and the power to spread this message, and that these animals play a role in that, which is really cool. And very cool that the tradition started with a child, because maybe they've got a little less baggage and they're a little more tapped in and they're still in that, space where they remember. And it's just like a very curious thing for them to do. And I know you've got 2 girls that you're raising on the farm, and I'm curious what that's been like, raising girls closer to nature, raising your family on nature. How are you, teaching them this stuff? So they're just so connected and it's so normal for them, instead of having it be like a normal person hearing that story might be a little jarred, right? They might be, whoa, wow, drinking blood and shooting it in the head and giving people knives and hacking it. It's a little bit jarring because we've become so removed from death. So I'm curious how, this has been for you, raising children in that environment and teaching them the ways of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of my greatest joys, to get to share this experience with my children. And so I have a 6-year-old named Scout and a 2-year-old named Wren, Wren. And, they, we talk about like the remembering for us, but they never forgot.
Yeah.
And there's so much wisdom to take in from a child. And at all of our animal harvesting, classes or educational experiences, it's always a child that steps up and elevates the experience and sets the new standard every year. The first year we did turkey harvest, no one wanted to actual pull the trigger. Second year, like the first boy that went up was like, "Can I do that part?" Everyone started doing it. The year after that, some little girl was like, "Can I go catch my own turkey?" Everyone started doing that. So kids are like just this amazing force of clarity and connectivity, and there's so much wisdom to learn from them. And one of my favorite things to do with my daughter Scout is we'll go arrowhead hunt, because it's just so cool to be outdoors, moving slowly, be really in tune with your landscape, connect to it, but also connect to the civilizations and the people that were there before you. And something that she taught me doing that was, like, we have 2 very different strategies. So I'm moving across the landscape. I'm pretty confident, but I recognize that, like, if you had to define how I focus on the land, it's like laser focus. I'm like wearing binoculars, 30 zoom. Where my kid, she's like a bison, like peripheral vision, eyes on the side of her head, really wide field of view. She's on the ground moving like a Texas armadillo, painfully slow. And I'm just kind of like blitzing across. And I mean, there's so many times where Scout has found these artifacts that are just absolute world class, could belong in a museum.
Wow.
And I stepped on them, minutes before she found them. And so, she loves imparting some wisdom with me. And one of the things that really stuck was, she's like, "Dad, you're doing it all wrong. You suck at arrowhead hunting." It's like, okay, I guess I do kind of suck because I'm getting dominated by you. And she said, "Here's what you're doing wrong. So I want you to get on your hands and your knees." And so I got on my hands and your knees, and she's like, "I want you to talk to the earth." So again, like, she said, "I want you to talk to the earth. I want you to tell the earth why you're here and what we're looking for." She's like, "Watch this." And all right, I'm here with my dad. I really want him to take this opportunity to learn how to connect at a higher level. I mean, like, just so much wisdom coming out of a 6-year-old. I'm like tearing up, as she's doing this. And she's like, "Okay, you're done. Like, you've passed through this ceremony. Now you're ready to engage with the landscape at a higher level. You're ready to find arrowheads." And she's so spot on.
There's so much wisdom there. And I think the reframe of being able to humble yourself and see that, you're going to have to teach your children something, but more than anything else, they are our teachers, right? That's what I'm learning firsthand too. And to hear you recount that story of, she taught you, she said, "Dad, you suck. You got to humble yourself and get told what to do by a little child that you created." And it's such a trip, but it's such a beautiful trip. That's amazing, man. I do want to talk about, like, pushing back a little bit against the prevailing and dominant narratives. You had a post. Let me find it here. Eating meat is healthy, sustainable, and ethical. That's like kind of a controversial statement. In our little echo chamber here, we all get that, but I would need you to defend that, because according to the common wisdom, eating meat is healthy. No. What about this red meat is terrible for you? It's certainly not good for the climate, right? Cow farts and burps and all of this stuff. And ethical, you're a monster. You're taking the life when you don't need to. So how would you kind of defend your position there? How can you say with such confidence that eating meat is healthy, sustainable, and ethical?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I volunteer. We have this really cool community school in our neighborhood. It's called Heritage. It's a private school. And they empower their seniors, so they're like 16 to 17-year-old kids, to have a thesis. And they work on it for a whole year. And then they bring in people from the community to sit with them and really listen to it and challenge their thesis. And every time, it's sad that this happens, but there's someone who's like, plant-based diet's the only way to do it. If you eat meat, you suck. Like, you're missing all these things, exactly what you said. And so I'm in the room with these young adults, and the first thing, and really the only thing that I need to say is, so have you been out to a farm that grows plants? And they're like, well, actually, no. So, all right, well, how can you make this assumption? How can you make such a strong statement and have such a strong position if you've never actually put your feet on the ground for the system in which you're advocating for? And then likewise, have you ever been out? You haven't been out to Rome Ranch. Have you ever been out to a ranch that's regeneratively raising their animals? No. And so really that's where it all begins. That's where you really defend that argument is say, you need to see it for yourself. And it's like, well, is it seeing is believing, or is it believing is seeing? Mm-hmm. When you get there, it is hard to argue. And one of the things that we've been kind of using as an example is we'll be out on the pastures with the bison, and we'll kind of like say, all right, this is what an acre looks like kind of draw it out for someone to see. We'll say, in this acre of land, there's 1 billion sentient beings co-creating in nature. There's a high degree of biodiversity. This ecosystem is functioning. Like 1 billion, that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So we'll say like, all right, here's how you can do it. So like a ream of paper, printer paper, 500 sheets, like 1.5 inches. So like, what is, if you can say 1 billion sheets of paper, what does that look like? And that's paper stacked up 300,000 feet high. And that is what you're looking at in a system that is teeming with life. That is a system that you're participating in with animals in nature's image. It only happens with livestock. And then you could take that same example to a farm field, and you can see this. It's just so clear that there is a fraction of a percent of the life that is happening in that field. Everything has been decimated. It's been turned into an ecological desert. You've removed all habitat. You've removed all food resources. You've broken the water cycle. And if that's not enough to kill or move all animals off that landscape, you also spray poison on the plants and on the soil. And so it's like this connection, this reality, this is what industrial agriculture is intentionally separating us from. They don't want you to know this. They don't want you to see this, but it becomes abundantly clear when you slow down and you go to any farm or ranch that grows a monoculture.
Yeah, it's completely missing the forest for the trees, right? Just because we've become so imbibed by this narrative around it, I guess, or so hyper-focused on that it's cruel or something else. And I think actually there'd be a lot of crossover with our narratives around we don't want to support caged animal feeding operations either. We're not saying go out and just buy your conventional raised stuff, where you can support these farms. But this biodiversity piece, I think, is very often missed, and what that's going to do for the long-term impact of feeding people. And if, God forbid, I would say we ever end up in Planet of the Vegans, we're not going to be able to do that without mass production of synthetic fertilizers, chemicals, herbicides, rodenticides, etc. What is biodiversity in a nutshell? You said it's teeming with life. What is that life? The soil in the life? Like, how do you define biodiversity, and how does regenerative systems, blow it out of the water?
Yeah. So, again, when you look into the architecture of nature, and you can do this, I can do this, the listeners can do this. Like, close your eyes, think about the most beautiful place you've ever visited in your life. And, some people take a moment and they'll say like, oh, I remember when I was like in a coral reef diving, or I remember like when I went to the jungle in Costa Rica, like the rainforest. And the places that people recount, maybe Yellowstone, something like that, are the places when you really back up and you say, why was that the most beautiful place you've ever been to? It's beautiful because there was so many living organisms all co-creating with one another. Nature will never, in a functioning state, have a monoculture. She's always fighting a monoculture. That's why chemical industrial plant agriculture has to use tools like mechanical tools and chemical tools to control a monoculture, to dominate Mother Nature. And so biodiversity is everything. It's a principle of soil health. It adds resilience to your system. Even if you raise livestock, you can think about biodiversity of the species that you raise. You think about the biodiversity of the species in the soil, which, I'm sure you've heard this before, but a single tablespoon of healthy soil has more living, sentient, more living organisms. We'll say living, so we don't have to define if that's sentience or not. More living organisms than all humans on the face of the planet since the starting of time. And so that is teeming with life. We only know a very fraction of a small percent of what's actually happening in there. And so when I think about biodiversity, I think of resiliency. And another really quick example is like for every undesirable pest, insect, or species that might be a problem in an ecosystem, in a functioning ecosystem, there should be 1,400 predator insects for that. And so what happens when you come in there and you're spraying your insecticides is you are nuking the entire system. You're resetting it. And it turns out that the insects that are more undesirable are the ones that are most resilient. And so they're the ones that perpetuate and that dominate after that cycle. So again, it's just the resilience and the balance in which Mother Nature created homeostasis is all foundationally based on biodiversity.
Is it safe to say that you cannot rehabilitate broken soils because of these egregious practices without animal husbandry and agriculture?
It's 100%. Yeah. And that's, I feel like people were shy or nervous about saying it for a long time. Maybe they still are, but like there is no such thing as a plant-based system that is good for the planet. It is 100% founded upon extraction of nutrients and domination of Mother Nature. There's no other way. So if you go to Whole Foods or Natural Grocers or Sprouts, if you are shopping produce, you are supporting a system that's an extractive system, because think about it. You're literally taking something from the landscape, and what are you putting back on that landscape? Over time, if you extract money from your bank account and you never put more money in your bank account will collapse. Same thing is happening to the ecosystems. So the only way to heal that system is, again, look into the architecture of nature. Mother Nature created these abundant, fertile food systems with animals and plants. But when you remove animals from the systems, like keystone species like bison, everything suffers. The plants suffer. The plants turn out they need that animal impact to stimulate the growth of roots, to stimulate the growth of grass blades, to cycle oxidized carbon material back into the soil to feed the biology. The anatomical design of a bison hoof actually helps aerate soil, allows rainfall to go in, air to circle or cycle. It allows seeds to germinate. And so it's so dysfunctional to think that without that animal, the system could survive. Is just such a separation from reality. The only way that you do that is with chemicals, which is, again, always fighting that cycle of nature.
It's almost like nature knows, right? It's almost like there's some kind of intelligent design to this thing that's been happening for as long as we could even fathom. And you know that when we try and come in over the top and be so smart with our lab coats and synthetic stuff, that we probably break some shit in the process. Yeah,
and it's not even, there's that element to it where we need to be completely honest and say this plant-based system is 100% an extractive degenerative system. But on the other side, we need to say that animal, that ruminant animal, that is a sacred entity. That is a gift from the source in which we can heal our landscapes. And so what does it look like to celebrate it? And right now we're demonizing it. And so really one of the things that I want to change that narrative is just empower people to say that's bullshit. That doesn't make sense. Like animals like bison, cows, sheep, goats, they are the highest level of a gift to restore and heal landscapes.
Yeah, awesome. You're giving people options. You're putting stuff on the shelves. You're inviting people out. You're teaching. You're educating. You're coming on podcasts. You're spreading the good word. Tell us a little bit about Force of Nature Meats, because we've name dropped it a couple of times, but we haven't actually talked about what that is.
Yeah. So we started a company called Force of Nature after Epic, and really far too long we have recognized that farmers and ranchers have disproportionately had to take the blame for the consequences of our extractive chemical agriculture. And it's already hard enough being a farmer and a rancher. I mean, like the amounts of depression and suicide rate in those industries it's greater than almost any other industry you could look at, even veterans of foreign wars. And so you have these people that have this connection to land. Typically it's multiple generations. They're connected to a small community. They're in high levels of debt and a high level of stress, and their kids don't want anything to do with it too. And so you're taking this community and you're blaming them for all the environmental degradation that's happening. And governments across the world are starting to now say, hey, we need to regulate those farmers and ranchers and tell them what they can and cannot do. And by the way, animals are something they should not be doing. And so for us, it's mind-boggling. And as a company, we want to say, like, hold on. Consumers are the ones that should be looking at themselves in the mirror. Consumers are the ones that have not only allowed this system to be perpetuating, but the ones who are actually fueling that system, because they're expecting products that are cheap and abundant and available year-round without any consideration to the consequences otherwise that are felt on the land and the rural landscapes and the communities. And so force of nature was really this idea, this spirit to re-empower consumers and change that narrative and help them feel comfortable and confident purchasing meat in a way that not only is good for their own body, but good for those rural communities, good for those landscapes, good for those families, and can create large-scale positive change. And so that's why we started Force of Nature. And we ship meat nationally. We also ship meat. We have meat available at retail nationally, which was really fun when we started 4 years ago. Our first meeting with a primary large food retailer, they just said, this is absolutely insane. No one wants this. And literally looked at us in the eyes and said, people already think our bison is grass-fed. So if we put your bison right next to them, then they're going to know that for 10 plus years, we've had a shitty product that's kind of been greenwashed. And so that was like our first forte into getting this product on retail shelves. But slowly we feel like we've been able to motivate and incentivize and have people align with their values to how they purchase meat. And this revolution, it's only started. Yeah, it's really exciting. And so Force of Nature is growing. But we just want to be that national ability for people to purchase meat in a way that aligns with their own spirit and soul.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think you're spearheading this to a large degree, and you mentioned some other names that are really spearheading it too and paying it forward. And I think we might have even touched on this, that the average age of the farmer in the US is 58, 60 years old, and it's kind of like a dying art. But with messages like this and conversations like this, and you know, being on the younger side, and me to a much lesser degree, you're not going to find my meat in stores anytime soon, but taking the power back and homesteading and finding land, I think it's becoming more of an appealing option for people again. And I just want to thank you for that. And it sounds like you're jazzed up about the movement, of course, because it's the future. You've got children, you want them to inherit good land. What excites you, and what is next? How do you continue to just keep paying this forward? What's coming from you? What's coming from Force of Nature? What's coming from Rome Ranch and this entire mission?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of our biggest efforts that we put forth every year is we host a large conference at the ranch in April, and it's just legendary. It's world class. We have speakers from all over the globe coming. This year we have people from Australia speaking. We have people from Mexico speaking, and these are people that are telling the stories of nature's capacity for healing. And the event's called the What Good Shall I Do conference. We cap it at about 400 people. And what happens there is just absolutely sacred. Like how we come together, the topics that we approach, but then the hope that is gifted and shared amongst everyone. People leave that conference and they quit their jobs and they change their lives. They change the trajectory. One really cool example, there's so many amazing examples, but last year there was a handful of people from our community, which was really neat because we live in a rural, very conventional community. And this lady came up to us afterwards and said, I've always wanted to have a summer camp for children, and I've always wanted to teach them about gardening, and I'm going to do it this year. And sure enough, she followed through with that.
Let's go.
Yeah, she had 4 camps this year, and our daughter went to all 4 of them, and they were like, how do you compost? How do you build soil health? How do you create pollinator habitats? This is catching on, and it's fueling the next generation. It's just providing me with so much hope. And so, bring it on. Let's keep going.
That is so good. We're going to transition into a caller for a second, but you said a key word here, and it's what your podcast is named after. So my last question for you today is, where does hope grow?
Okay. Yes, sir. The podcast is called Where Hope Grows. And, I feel like hope grows for me in different areas every day. And so it's always evolving and it's always changing. But right now, where hope grows for me is friends and family members who have had to deal with tremendous medical issues their whole lives. Particularly a good friend of mine out of San Antonio area was morbidly obese. He was 300 plus pounds, couldn't fulfill his highest potential of being, very depressed, suicidal, and he changed his diet and he changed his lifestyle. And this guy now is such a high-functioning contributor to society, such a happy man, beautiful wife, 2 beautiful children. His career, his pathway now, he's a part of the water conservation district in his area. So he's advocating for soil health as a way to recharge aquifers, maintain our natural ecosystem, what the hill country is so beautifully known for. And this man was on a trajectory and a pathway to not experiencing that, not being fulfilled in any of that, but with the simple idea of healing his body through food and through lifestyle. He's just was reborn. And so that's it. I mean, it's our ability to die metaphorically and be reborn as something greater.
And it's the power of story, I think, that unlocks that for a lot of people. When they see you do it or they hear a podcast, it gives them permission to do it too. So thank you for being an excellent storyteller. Thank you for helping us to continue to tell this story. And hopefully we get a lot more people reversing the tide of the decline in health and voting with the dollar and supporting amazing brands like you. But we get to speak to one of those on the line right now. It appears we have Ashley, who's a Texas native, who's got a question for you, Taylor. Ashley, are you with us? What can we help you with?
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I just wanted to first say thank you to Taylor for, being a pioneer in this regenerative movement. I've been a fan of Forces of Nature for a while now, and I remember when I would see it on the shelves and, think to myself, I really wish I could, budget for that and include that in my grocery cart. But now I'm really excited to be able to do that, and I've made an intentional effort to be able to include Forces of Nature in my grocery cart and vote with my dollar. So thank you for making that a possibility.
Oh, absolutely. You're a champion. Yeah, you're a force of change. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is actually about how individuals who, don't have access to land or don't own land, how can they make a positive impact on, regenerative systems and help build a future that we want to see, especially for, the future generations?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I think the idea that you have to be a farmer or a rancher to create change, it's not accurate, and it's not inclusive, because there's only 2% of Americans have access to farm and ranch land. And so that's not a reality to make this a large national or global movement. And so, I'd start with just some really basic foundational concepts of better connecting to earth, to land, to source, whatever that might look like for you. And if that, that can be going out to a park, going out to a sit spot, which is a spot that you find peace in nature and reflecting. I think that's something that we could all do to slow down and really just take in that wisdom and that inspiration that is before us all the time. If you have the ability to, most people have a yard, or most people have a porch, or a deck, and there's always opportunity to grow something. I think there's such a magical experience in taking a seed and caring for that seed and nurturing that seed and putting your hands in the soil every day and forming that relationship with that plant. That's a tremendous place to start. Everyone should be able to do that. And then if you kind of wanted to go a little bit bigger, there's a book by a man named Gabe Brown. It's called From Dirt to Soil. And in it, he talks about these 5 principles of soil health. And the beautiful thing about those 5 principles is they're applicable to any context and any land across the globe. And so, again, these are kind of like rules from nature, the architecture of nature. And so I would look at that book, and if you have the ability to influence maybe your yard or maybe a local park, or just kind of celebrate and share that message, I think that will get you more connected to this movement and being a part of the change that is happening.
Love that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
Thanks for calling in, Ashley. Taylor nailed that. I'll just put a little bow on it by saying the fact that you're even asking this question is very hopeful, right? Like the fact that people are even thinking about what they could do and the intention is all we could hope for, because that will slowly ripple out. So keep being rad, keep being awesome, Ashley. Taylor, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. It's been a real treat for me. I've been following this journey for a long time and been, making my animal-based chicken nuggets with your products, chowing down on Force of Nature meats, supporting the movement, and to, sit down here is another one of those full circle moments. So thanks for joining us, man. Tell everybody about where they can find you. I do want to tease the audience a little bit. We have a kind of like a mini feature documentary coming out on you as well. That's going to go live in middle of October that follows Taylor around the ranch and a day in the life, and it's beautifully put together by the team. So that's coming in mid-October. You got to keep your eyes peeled for that. But where can they keep up with you in the meantime? Like, where's the best place to keep up with all the things you're going?
Yeah, head over to roamranch.com, and we have an event calendar on there, and it's stacked. I mean, this is the time of year. Fall is the most glorious moment in Texas. And so come out to the ranch, participate in a bison harvest your own Thanksgiving turkey with us. We have really cool educational classes. We have farm to table dinners. So, I mean, I'm there at all those events with my wife and our ranch hand. And I mean, really just looking to celebrate this collective community and get to know each and every one of you that's interested in it. And thank you personally, but also have you join us and accelerate forward.
Heck yeah. And if you want more Taylor Collins deemed to the brain dome through your ears, you can find you chatting away on a podcast too. What's that called again? Remind us.
Yes, the podcast is called Where Hope Grows, and
Awesome.
It's Force of Nature put that podcast on, and it's really specifically diving into these topics that we've been discussing today, but with a greater audience of farmers and ranchers and land stewards, and what that looks like, from everything from someone who manages 200,000 acres to someone who has a backyard garden or growing herbs on their porch.
Thank you for everything you do, man. Thanks for coming out. Thank you to the listener. Let's keep paying it forward. Big love, brother.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll see you next time. Thank you. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.